welcome back to Vital Signs. Today we're talking about the skeletal system. If you're new here, I'm Professor Thomas. I'm here to give you a crash course on all things anatomy and physiology. Let's dive in. Starting off with our functions of the skeletal system. The skeletal system is a supportive framework. It gives things in the body something to attach to. But that's not the only function of the skeletal system. The skeletal system also has a protective function. Think about your skull bones and how they protect your brain, or your rib cage, how it protects your heart and your lungs. The skeletal system does make movement possible in conjunction with the muscular system. It plays a role in storing vital substances like calcium and performs hematopoiesis, which is the formation of blood cells. Going back to storage of calcium, there are two hormones that I want you to know: parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. When blood levels of calcium are low, your parathyroid is going to release parathyroid hormone. And what this does is it encourages the bones to essentially release some of that stored calcium and get levels back up to where they're supposed to be. Calcitonin is antagonistic to this. It means it's the opposite. Calcitonin is coming from your thyroid. When calcium levels are too high in the blood, calcitonin is released from the thyroid and it inhibits the breakdown of the bones. We don't want those levels getting any higher than they need to be. Talking about the growth structure of bones, we have four major types of bone in the body: a long bone, a short bone, a flat bone, and an irregular bone. Some scientists will also recognize a fifth category, which is sesamoid. Sesamoid is a very round bone. A good example of this would be your patella or your kneecap. Now let's get into the structure of a long bone. This central sort of shaft of the long bone is called diaphysis. And if we were to cut inside of it, we would find yellow bone marrow. The hollow space inside of this diaphysis is called the medullary cavity. On the ends of long bones, we'll find the epiphyses. These are filled with red bone marrow. And on the ends of each epiphysis, we'll find articular cartilage, which is a layer of hyaline cartilage that creates a cushion point for the joints. Covering the entire bone everywhere except for at the joint, we would find periosteum. And if we go inside of the bone, lining the interior of the bone is endosteum. One term that you do want to know when it comes to flat bones is diplo. An example of a flat bone would be the bones of your skull or your ribs. If we were to cut a flat bone in half, we would find two layers of compact bone, but in between those layers, we would find a spongy layer, and that spongy layer is the diplo. Spongy bone is also known as cancellous bone, and it's called spongy because it has these needle-like threads called trabeculae that create the interior of it. We find spongy bone or cancellous bone in the epiphyses of long bone, so the ends of a long bone, and the spaces between the trabeculae have red bone marrow in them. The structural unit of a compact bone would be the osteon, and these are arranged in multiple layers of concentric lamella. Bone cells themselves are called osteocytes, different from cartilage cells. Those are chondrocytes. And osteocytes are found in spaces called lacunae, which are connected by tiny tubes called canaliculi. Okay, let's get into the fun part now, naming the bones. As we're studying the names of the bones, we split the skeleton into two major subskeletons: the axial and appendicular. The axial skeleton is kind of your core of the body. It's your head, it's your spine, it's your sternum and your ribs, whereas appendicular skeleton would be like your arms and legs, the bones located there. We'll start with the axial skeleton. There are 80 bones we want to memorize. We're going to start from the skull and work our way down. Starting with the 8 bones of the cranium. Let's take a look at our skeleton here. So this big guy, front and center, it's our forehead, right? This is our frontal bone. If we tilt our skull down and look at either side here, these are each parietal bones. Turning them around, if we look at the back of the skull, this bone right here is the occipital. Looking on either side, right where your temples are at, these are going to be your temporal bones. Anterior to the temporal, you'll find this right here. This is the sphenoid, and this is just one bone. It's going from this side to this side, so it's connecting in the middle. Lastly, we have the ethmoid, which is kind of hard to see here. You might be able to see a little bit of it in the medial eye socket, but the best way to identify the ethmoid is it'll have a bunch of holes in it that look like honeycomb. We call those the ethmoid sinuses. And if you're looking at a skull cut in half and they're asking you to identify a bone that has a bunch of honeycomb-like spaces, you know that's your ethmoid. On top of knowing the names of those cranial bones, we also want you to know the names of some sutures. Sutures are connection points between bones. We'll start with this one. So this is our frontal bone here. These are our parietals. This suture that connects them is called the coronal. Easy to remember because this is the crown of your head. Then, connecting our two parietals right here, this is our sagittal suture. And if you remember your planes of the body, the sagittal splits the body into a right and left half. So that's not too bad to memorize. Turning it around on the back side, we have this suture that's connecting your occipital with your parietals. This is the lambdoid, also known as the lambdoidal suture. Last one that I would really pay attention to is this right here. It's connecting our temporal, parietal, and sphenoid. This is your squamous suture. Moving on to our face bones, we have 14 we want to memorize here. If we start at the bridge of the nose, you'll notice there are two bones here. Boom, boom. These are your nasal bones. Easy to remember because nasal nose. Then here and here, these are our maxilla. And students will often get this mixed up with the mandible, which is our lower jaw bone. Maxilla, we have two of them, one on either side. These are on the top, superior. Mandible is inferior, it's on the bottom. His jaw's a little dislocated right now. Mandible is on the bottom, it's inferior. How I keep this straight is you dribble on your mandible. If you are drooling, it would go onto your mandible. This bone here and this bone here, these are our zygomatic bones. They make up that cheekbone. If we look in the medial wall of the eye socket, we'll find our lacrimal bones. Looking in the mouth here, forming the posterior part of the roof of the mouth is the palatine. It also forms part of the orbit floor. Then we have our inferior nasal conchae. These form kind of the wall of the nose here and here. Not to be confused with the vomer, which is a septum that's splitting the nose in half. We've only got 6 skull bones left at this point, 3 in each ear. These are our smallest bones in the body. In each ear, you have a malleus, incus, and stapes for a total of 6 middle ear bones. The malleus is sometimes called the hammer, the incus is the anvil, and the stapes is the stirrup. All right, guys, we're done with those skull bones. We're moving down the spine now. Our spines are made of vertebrae. That's what each of these things are. And we separate our spine into 3 categories, 3 main categories: cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. How you count the vertebrae is we go from the top down. So our first vertebrae would be C1, and then C2, and then C3, so on and so forth. Once we hit the thoracic section, we're T1, T2, so on and so forth. And then when we're in lumbar, we're L1, L2, we keep going down. We have 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, and 5 lumbar vertebrae. How I keep this straight is those are your meal times. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7, 12, 5. At the bottom of our lumbar section of the spine, you'll notice we have 5 fused vertebrae. This is your sacrum, and then the tailbone down here is your coccyx. Going back up to our cervical section, C1 and C2 are important. They have names you need to know. C1 is the atlas, C2 is the axis. The atlas, C1, is what allows you to shake your head up and down to say yes. C2, the axis, is what allows you to move your head left to right to say no. Talking about the bones of the thorax now. This is our sternum, but to know that that's the sternum is not enough. You want to know the different subsections here. So this superior portion of the sternum is your manubrium. Then we get into the body of the sternum, and lastly, the xiphoid process. Our ribs are numbered 1 through 12, and we have 12 pairs of ribs for a total of 24. Ribs 1 through 7, you'll notice have this clear stuff connecting them to the sternum. This is costal cartilage. Costal is a fancy word for rib. So ribs 1 through 7 are all directly attached to the sternum via this costal cartilage. That makes them true ribs. Ribs 8, 9, and 10, they're not directly attached. We see they are attached through the costal cartilage of rib 7. That makes these false ribs. And then let's turn them around. 11 and 12 don't have any costal cartilage whatsoever. These guys are floating ribs. All right, let's move into our appendicular skeleton, which is really just our limbs. We're gonna start with the pectoral girdle. There are 2 bones that I want you to know. This here is our clavicle, which connects to our scapula, not scalpula. If you say it like that, you're gonna sound like an idiot. Scapula. This joint here, this connection between our appendicular and axial skeleton is pretty important. This is our sternoclavicular joint. Another bony landmark that I want to point out to you is this sort of divot in the scapula. This divot is your glenoid cavity, and that is where your humerus is attaching to the scapula. So moving on, this is our humerus. It is the 2nd largest bone in the body, and it's the only bone of the upper arm. If we go down lower, we're looking at this assuming the person is in anatomical position. So when you're in anatomical position, palms faced forward. And you can do this on yourself. So our palms are faced forward. If we are in that position, we have the radius and ulna. Ulna is the medial one. This is what's on your pinky side. Radius is the lateral one. This is what's on your thumb side. A bony landmark worth mentioning here is the ollocranon process on your ulna. This is what makes your elbow. Let's talk about the wrist bones now. These are your carpal bones, and if you've ever heard of carpal tunnel and associate that with the wrist, it might help you remember carpal bones. We have 8 of them here, and we do need to memorize all of them. They've got some weird names. Scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform, trapezoid, trapezium, capitate, and hamate. I've got a memory trick for this. Some lovers try positions that they can't handle. It's silly, but it does help you remember. Past these carpal bones, we have the metacarpal bones, and anything beyond the metacarpal bones are phalanges. All right, you guys, at this point we are in the lower extremity. We're looking at our pelvis. So each of these big bones is a coxal bone, but in infancy, these are actually 3 separate bones. The ilium, which is this big part up here, the ischium, which is kind of tucked back, and then the pubis, which is the point that connects in the center at this piece of cartilage called the pubic symphysis. One bony landmark I want to point out to you is this indent in the coxal bone. This is called an acetabulum, and this is where the head of the femur connects with the coxal bone. The femur is our largest bone of the body, and that's really all you need to know about it. At the inferior portion of the femur, we are articulating with 2 bones, the patella, which is our knee bone, and then the tibia. So if we look at our lower leg here, we've got a big bone and a little bone. This big guy is your tibia. Your little bone over here is your fibula. Don't call this a tibula. That's not a thing and you'll sound like an idiot. Tibia, fibula. The tibia, being the bigger bone, is the weight-bearing bone of the lower leg. Okay, we're looking at the foot now. This bone right here, your heel bone, is called the calcaneus. This right here is your talus, and this is going to articulate with the tibia. All of these sort of foot bones on this half of the foot are called your tarsal bones, different from the carpal bones of the wrist. And we've already gone over the 2 big ones. The others that are worth pointing out are, we have this guy here is your navicular. Over here, this is the cuboid. And then we have our cuneiforms, lateral, intermediate, and medial cuneiform. These are the metatarsals, and then anything past that is a phalange. Wrapping things up with some skeletal variations, there are going to be differences between a male and a female skeleton. For example, male skeletons tend to have bigger bones. Female skeletons tend to have smaller bones. The rest of the differences are most noticeable in the pelvis. Starting off with the shape of the pelvis, a male pelvis will be deep and narrow. A female pelvis will be shallow and broad. I had a teacher in grad school who said that's why we call them broads, and it's offensive, funny, and it helps you remember. The pelvic inlet is this big hole that's in the center of the pelvis between the 2 coxal bones. A female's pelvic inlet will be wider than a male's pelvic inlet because it has to be wide enough for a baby's head to pass through. The last difference is in the pubic angle or pubic arch. A male pubic arch is going to be more narrow or acute. A female pubic arch is going to be more wide or obtuse. And there you have it, guys. That is the skeletal system. Thanks for joining me this week on Vital Signs. I'll see you next time.